Hello and welcome to my next playthrough. This time we're looking at Leningrad from Decision Games. Similar to my last video, Fells Gate, I've gone for another simpler title that should be easier to play through completely and concentrate more on the strategy rather than all the complex rules. Leningrad is a reissue of old SPI game originally titled Leningrad the Advance of Army Group North, summer 1941, published way back by SPI in 1979. I would have just about been old enough to play it back then, but it's got quite a good following for such an old game. There's quite an active forum on Consum World, and I think although it doesn't seem to be the most balanced game in terms of it's pretty hard to win for the Germans, it does seem to really bring to life some of the problems they had in terms of getting to Leningrad, and often comes up with quite a historically accurate result. It's also quite a good game to play through solitaire for some of the reasons that I'll come to in a minute. The aim of this first video is to take you through the first turn in detail, and then I'll look to speed things up a little bit in terms of taking through every single step. As I noticed some of my other videos are getting very long, maybe that will be an easier way to get to grips with the strategy rather than seeing the mechanics again and again. Let me know which one you prefer. So if we summarise the situation, we're looking at Army Group North here, lined up in East Prussia. This is June 1941. So Field Marshal von Lieb has set his forces up and they're ready to roll as part of Operation Barbarossa. Opposing them, we've got the Baltic Special Military District, soon to become the Northwestern Front of Colonel General Kuznetsov, and that's lined up initially along the borders. We've got some armoured and mechanised troops in reserve, and then if we move across the map we have another series of units in the middle here, and then finally we get to Leningrad in the far right of the map. North is pretty much, oh, can't see that, is kind of up this way, but I think I'll stick with left to right. It's probably easier to see from the map and the video. So that's the historical situation. In the game, the Soviets set up first, and probably before I talk about the setup, I should probably cover off some of the unique features of the counters which make this particularly interesting to play solitaire. So the Browns are the Soviets, probably no surprise, but you may have noticed that actually they've only got one value on them. So I'll give you a close up here. Yep, yes, focused. Let's put it this way so it focuses up. So all Soviet units come in into what's called untried. So that's a bit of focused. Feature of the game at this stage is the Soviet, or the history, that the Soviet army had been massively reorganised, and really they weren't sure how good any of their units were, and certainly in the reinforcements a lot of them had been very hastily thrown together. So you don't know how they're going to perform. So they all come in this way, and then once they actually get into combat, you flip them over and you actually see how good they're going to be. First number there is the attack strength, second defense, the number in white, which is always visible, is their movement allowance. So that means you're never quite sure as a Germans what you're going to get, and similarly for the Soviets until you make some attacks. But it quite neatly makes each game slightly different because you can't plan for what's going to be exactly in any given position. So you can see all the Soviets lined up that way. The Germans' counters are more traditional. So they just have one number, that's their attack and the defense. That kind of focus, and the movement. The Russia says because they are obviously got an untried side, the Soviet counters are only one step. The Germans, however, are two step. so they have a reduced strength side on the back. This is part of the, if you can see the numbers there, can we see the numbers better? It's probably better, it's there. The 41st, the number in brackets is it's the 41st mechanised core, and there are 3 other units all down here which are part of that. If you keep the cores together and the units are still whole, you get benefits in combat, and together these 2 cores here and here formed the 4th Panzer Group under General Oberst Erich Hauptner, and they're pretty key to any Soviet, any German rather, success in this, because they're the bonuses both you get for both armour and keeping the cores together. The rest of the German units are fairly standard infantry division. These are all divisions as a standard 6. There are a few that have 8 and 7, so they're stacked up. Stacking is 3 in this, so each of these is set up basically as a core strength. You're pre-packed because you have to set behind this line, which is the border between East Prussia and the Russian territories, and there's not a lot of chance in the setup, but that seems to fit quite historically the number of cores each army had. You had the 18th and the 16th infantry armies backing up the 4th Panzer Group. So in the setup, most of the setup for the Russians is prescribed. Basically on the board it actually tells you what you need to set up, and so all this is set up. So is this. The options you get are in your second army. Kuznetsov had the 27th Army in reserve, and you basically have to set up 1 unit in each of these hex columns. So the 7 in total, but only 1 in each. So they're all pretty spread out as they weren't expecting the attack. There's some features of the first turn, which means the Soviets just threw everything into a counterattack historically, and they need to do that. So all units have to move up and close on the Germans and attack if possible. So actually what I've done is I've set these up to pretty much make sure that they can't get to the Germans unless something very strange happens, and that they can try and set up a line along the Dvina River, which again historically is where the Soviets fell back to their second line of defence. So these should hopefully be able to move up. And just to complete the kind of setup, there's a couple of units, you may wonder why they're upside down, they're to remind me they don't move first up. There's another one off, which we'll see when we come back to the starting setup. Russian reinforcements tend to come on down here, here, or up, coming down from the Finnish front up there. So you need to be aware of that, and basically they feed in pretty much every turn throughout the game. So there's not a lot of strategy in the initial Soviet setup, but other than the 27th Army making sure that they don't get caught up in the Germans' attack, really the aim of the Soviets is to slow the Germans down. If they can lose as many units as they like, that doesn't give the Germans any victory points. Only the capture of hexes in Leningrad do that. So they really need to slow things down. Each unit has a zone of control which pretty much halts things when they move into. I'll cover that off in the movement phase. The other thing they need to think about, and it's more of a strategy for their turn, is when they move in the attack they need to try and minimise as far as possible their losses. They're going to be bad in that first turn, but again we'll need to think of that. So generally what you'll see is as they come on, they'll feed them through into these various fronts, try and build a series of lines around the defensive terrain to slow the Germans down, and that will allow time for the other reinforcements and the fortification of the area around Leningrad, which we'll pick up when we get to it in that part of the turn. The Germans have to think a bit more of this, and their strategy is it's got to be firstly to wipe out this area very, very quickly so they can move on. They can't get held up anywhere, and the aim really is to surround them. So the CRT in this game basically allows you, if you can retreat, you can get away and retreat without losses. So you really need to surround people if you want to wipe them out. or get very high odds. There's really two routes to Leningrad. If I go back over here, you can see it more clearly. Firstly, the first one, which is I suppose the coastal route, runs up along the road through a place called Kingsep up there. The second one, more inland route, runs through Pskov, that's probably not how you pronounce it, and then through the roads here. The roads are important because they're basically the German supply lines. Although there's this big open area here, it's got to be really careful going too far away from here, because if you can't trace back to a road, then you're out of supply, and that slows you down and ruins your combat effectiveness as well. So the way I'm planning to play this is that we're going to send the 56th Armoured Mechanised Corps along the coastal road, the 41st through Pskov and the woods. There's an important point in the game they need to consider, the Germans. In turn 8, historically the Russians launched a massive, actually let's move this a little bit more, a massive counter-attack with a whole series of infantry divisions that came up from this road here. On that turn they get a huge combat bonus, but also that 6 divisions is a major factor in trying to defend Leningrad. So ideally I need to get something across to here that basically can block this road. If they can block this road, then that'll slow those reinforcements down. If I can stop them getting to Leningrad, I've got a chance of winning. Just to explain the victory conditions for the Germans, there's basically, it's all about capturing Leningrad. I get 5 victory points for these two, 30 for each of these two. So I can capture one of those, I'm pretty much got a major victory, but that is extremely difficult to do. So usually the best the Germans can do is try and capture these two. Getting here in time to make these assaults is the real problem. So you generally, this general strategy is based around trying to get, assuming I can get to 10 victory points. I lose points for every loss I take. So basically I can take up to 9 points of losses and still get a 1 point tactical victory. So that's going to be important, and it's important to replace my units, which I'll come to keep them strong, but also to minimise the points the Russians get from the losses they inflict. So I think that's probably enough for, let's get this in the right place, for an introduction and a little bit about the strategy. So I'm going to go next into the first turn and take you through the sequence of events there.